Well, here in the United States, it is just about Mother's Day, and I thought it'd be a cool idea to make a Mother's Day e-card using a little bit of CSS animations and a little bit of JavaScript. Now, if you are not from the United States, it is never a bad time to let your mom know that you appreciate her. So I think this video is for everyone. So let's get started. Now, before we do get started, as always, if you like what you see here, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to help grow the channel. Also, all the material that is covered in this episode will be on my GitHub, so things like the images that we use and the audio file will be free to download there. Now, the main idea here is we're going to create a basic layout and then click events to start things off, be able to add screens with transitions, and then run through those screens to create this card that basically shows different things you appreciate about your mother. We're going to use some fonts from Google. I will provide a song and then images that I made that are not anything crazy, but they should be cute enough to get the job done. Now, if we go to just our basic empty index.html, we will see a link, and that's going to be to Google Fonts. So I will also put that in the description, so you don't even need to go to my GitHub for that. And then we're just linking to our styles.css as well as our main.javascript. So that's all we need to get started. What I've done so far is just put some of the basic styles in. So globally, we're just saying font family, sans serif, box sizing border box, margins and padding to 0. And in terms of the body, we're setting the min height to 100 view height. That basically means the body is at least going to be as tall as the screen you see. And then the display is flex, and we're center aligning the content with a background color of azure, which is this blue little color we see here. Now, the reason we're doing that is because we're going to put what I'm calling our stage right in the center. And so we're setting the width to 55% of the view width and the height as 35% of the view width. Now, the reason we're saying view width for both of them is we want the same aspect ratio no matter how tall the window is, with a background color of white and a border radius of 4 pixels just to keep it a little bit soft. And so we can start by creating that. And if we refresh, I hope it's visible that you can see just the white stage. And if we move it around, you can see that that should maintain the same aspect ratio. Now, the main components, and it's just a few of the application here, are going to be the title, text, and an image. And these are kind of all over the place because I like to keep everything alphabetized. Now we have the stage positioned relative, which means the title, the text, and the image can all be positioned absolute, and that's going to be important to make sure that we're able to flexibly put everything where we want to. So let's just give it a basic title, which is going to be click to start. And that'll be class title. And I'm also going to give this an ID of title, and we'll use that later. Now, the reason I'm putting an ID for stage and for title, title here, is that these are going to be referenced by the JavaScript later, and I like to keep the styling separate from anything that the JavaScript is referencing, just as a general principle. So if we save that here, we get click to start in this kind of funky font. I will shrink myself down a bit so we get all the important stuff. Yeah, so next, let's give just a basic image and a basic text, and I'll just kind of explain what we'll be doing here. All right, so this is with everything plugged in, which is showing what each little screen is going to look like, where it's going to always say you're the, and then we're going to have different images that describe different things that are great about a mother. So the ones that I wrote down are coolest, smartest, nicest, most patient, and the best. And so I have 5 images already that each are for each one of those attributes. And at this point, now what we're going to do is basically create the functionality for being able to make those appear and disappear in a cool way. And then after that, it'll be basically writing in the logic to loop through that. So let's go here. And the first thing I'm going to do is get access to both our title and our stage. And what I think I'm also going to do before I forget is just give us our song. And that's going to be a new audio referenced. And in my directory, it's in sounds. And I think it is called, oops. And I think it is called, yeah, mother.mp3. Now, so what I'm going to do here first is just hide the image and the text down below and make this say click to start. And then on our event listener, once somebody clicks, we can take that title and set the inner text to nothing, which will make it disappear. And also we want to go song.play to start playing our music. And I just refresh that to stop it. Shows that the song is working. I don't know how well you can hear it through here. I have to play it through my speaker into my microphone because the equipment I have for recording the screen is not picking up my computer's audio right now. But nevertheless, it's somewhat loud. And so for now that we know it works, I'm going to comment that out. But we do see that everything was happening that we wanted to. Text disappears and the audio is playing. As you'll see here, I left the functions. I already made this once just to make sure I had everything planned out. And just to try and keep the flow moving, I left the functions that I wrote just so that we can logically kind of knock them off one at a time. And the first one that we're going to knock off is this add screen. And the idea there is just that each screen will be a 5-second segment that is one of those attributes of cool, smart, nice, all that. It's probably also worth mentioning, at least, that I have this screens array. And this array is what we will use to loop through everything. But essentially, we're defining the image, which animation we want to use, the text, the animation for that text, and then the color for that text so that we can keep everything interesting And this just prevents us from having to hard code. And it also means that if you want to make a bunch of different animations that are cool and way more intricate than the ones we'll have in this video, you can do that. You can customize this however you want. And I just wanted to have this here so that we can not spend a bunch of time on it. And so we'll cover that when we get to it. But nevertheless, for adding a screen, the idea here is to create basically DOM elements that we are able to append. And then when we want to remove them, we can do that as well. And so what I will do is I will just create one for the image and one for the text. And these are going to come in the form of first strings that we turn into DOM elements. So in the case of this image element string, we can start just by taking the image. And for the text element string, same thing. And we will eventually use options for basically customizing each one of these elements to what we want. But first, I just want to get it so that it works to put something on the screen. So what we will be able to do is say something here like add screen, and then we'll be passing in a specific screen that we want it to, and then eventually we will have a delete after, which will be timed with the screen duration to just remove the element so that when we put the next one in, you don't have two on at the same time. So we can ignore this as well for now. But to get this onto the screen, like I said, we first need to create these DOM elements and then append them to our stage. And that'll look something like getting the image element will be string to DOM of the image element string. And the idea is once we have those created, we can say stage dot append the image element and stage dot append the text element. And so let's write this string to DOM. Now, this is just kind of a little weird. I've seen a few different ways to do this. I think the way that I'm going to do here is probably the cleanest, but nevertheless, it's something that just feels kind of hacky. And that's because we're going to be using what's called the DOM parser object, which is a built-in class in JavaScript. And I'll write this out and then kind of explain what's going on. And hopefully it's not too difficult to understand. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not very long. And so, yeah, let's do that. And that is what it looks like. Now, the reason it's kind of weird is because the DOM parser is kind of like a whole new document. And so that means it's not just HTML, but it's everything you see in an HTML document. So you have things like a head and a body. And therefore, what we're doing is we're saying take this string and put it into a DOM. And what we're getting out is a DOM where inside of the body is the HTML version of the string that we passed. And therefore, we need to say take the body and then take the children, which will be an array of elements, and just take the first one because we're just passing in a self-contained element. And if you made this an element that's holding a bunch of elements, all of those would still be in there. And so what we're getting back is just the one element that is this right here. And now the reason that we even need to do this step is because later on we want to delete it. So if we wanted to just take this string, what we theoretically could do is set the inner HTML of a different element, and then we could say document get that element and get the children that way. Or if we never wanted to change anything, we could always just set it to the inner HTML of something. But we need to be able to both append it and remove it later. So at this point, that should all work. And unless I'm forgetting something, parse from string. Yes. So I am forgetting one thing. And that is the DOM parser requires a second argument. And that is essentially the format of what you're passing in. So in our case, it's text/HTML. And just like that, I clicked. And what we did was text disappeared like before. And then we added the screen, which ran all of this code. And just like that, we were able to append. So if I refresh it again, once I click, boom, we get both our image and the text. Now, in terms of the delete after functionality, what I'm going to do up here is just set a screen duration as 5,000. And this is 5,000 milliseconds. This is the same thing that is going to be in all of our animations. So we know just that that will remain as a constant number. And then what we'll say is if, in fact, we want to delete afterwards, then set a timeout and use our screen duration and just remove our image element and text element. And before we can test that, we have to say whoa, true. So we click on that. 5 seconds later, maybe, boom, it was removed, which is what we want. Good. And it's at this point that I think I will go ahead and cover some of the animations. So I have them commented out just because I thought it would be easier if I kind of show how it all works without having to code everything from scratch. And what I'll do is I'll cover one example in depth and then just maybe brush over some of them. And I think the most basic example is fade, where what we're doing is we're setting a keyframe where we're starting at 0%. So at the very beginning of our animation, we have an opacity of 0, which means invisible. Then at 10%, we want to be fully visible. All the way through 90%, we still want to be visible. And then at 100%, go to 0. Now, the reason that I have to have both 10% and 90% is that if I said go to 10% and have an opacity of 1, but then wait until 100 and be opacity of 0. That means it would go, the first bit, it would quickly fade in, and then it would just slowly fade out throughout the entire duration. And what we want is fade in, be there the whole middle section of while the image is being displayed, and then fade out. And I should note, this, I guess, is not just for an image, but also text. And then I also created a frame for fade in. And the reason I'm calling it fade in is we are saying from 0 to 10% 1, which is the same, and then at 100% still be at opacity of 1. And what that's doing is maintaining the same timing for fading it in, but then never actually fade it out. And the idea behind that is that we will use this on our very final one and not delete it, our final screen that is, and you just end with something to look at. And then the other ones that I created were related to just the image, and that's spinning it and grow spin. And in both of these, we're doing similar to the opacity, but we're using our transform. Now, the first things that we see here are translating X and translating Y. That actually has nothing to do with the animation. But if we look at our image here, the natural transform that we need just to display an image is to translate the X and the Y minus 50%. Because what we're doing is we're saying, set it 50% from the top, so halfway from the top and halfway from the left. And so then what we're doing is we're saying, move, instead of having the image's top left corner be at the very middle of the stage, we're saying, shift that image over and up so that the center of the image is at the center of the stage. And therefore, that pattern needs to be maintained, and that's why it's the same in all of these, is so that that's always consistent. So the image is always technically right there in the center. And then in the case of this example, we are having it spun around a few times, and so then it's going to spin its way in, and it starts at a 90-degree angle, so 3 times over to 270 degrees, and then that way it'll go all the way back to 0 where it's facing you. And we're starting it at a scale of super small, putting it up to a scale of 1, which means it's going to grow. This, I'm kind of going over this quickly, but we'll be able to see that once we program that part. The only other thing that I added is basically classes that are going to use those animations. So we have grow spin, fade, fade in, spin image, and that's what we will be able to assign to our elements, and they'll naturally do what we want. In all of these, we are setting it as, just like in our JavaScript, a 5-second animation and just linear. The animation fill mode is forwards, and that means at the end of the animation, leave it where it ends, and that just means you can predictably say what it's going to look like when the animation is already over. Now, it's at this point that we start to incorporate the screens. And so if you are coding along, I will show all of this object, and you can just pause it, and if you want to copy it down, you are free to. And basically what we're seeing here is our image is just the local image that we are going to use. Our image animation is the class that we're going to add to that image div. The text is what we're going to say. The text animation is also the class. In the case of the text, I just used the fade, so all of these you can see are fade. And then finally, text color, we will just use for inline styling. So this is also optional if you want the text to always be black. Now, the final main thing we have to do here is just create that run through screens, which is going to use that object to add all of the screens one after another. Now, not directly one after another. It needs to be wait the 5 seconds before we do that. And now that takes at least a little bit of thought, because you can't just one after another quickly say add this one, add this screen, add this screen. Otherwise, you just add all of them at once. You'd have 5 seconds where everything's there, and then they would all remove themselves. Instead, what we're going to do is create a recursive function where if nothing's passed, I is going to be 0. Otherwise, we'll just keep passing I. And we will keep going until we've gotten to I being the very final element of this array, and then be done. So in order to do that, we will say if I is, and we called that screens, and that needs to be greater than or equal to, just to be safe. If we get to the point where we're at the same as the length of it, then don't do anything. And that's because if we have 4 elements in the array, we want to only go to the position 3. Otherwise, we want to add the screen of screens I, and here, just for the start, I will put in a delete after as true, which we will come back to this in a bit to handle the part where we leave it if it's the final element. Then what we're going to do is set a timeout to the screen duration, and after we've waited 5 seconds, call run through screens with I plus plus. And there we go. And before I forget, we actually have to, so this we will say run through screens. And actually, just for the sake of doing this, getting this out of the way now, I'm going to say set timeout for just 2 seconds. And so that's basically going to give the music some time to start setting the mood. And also, we want to say title dot inner text you're the, and that's going to be setting up all of the different screens. Another thing that I don't want to forget to do is just say up here, let is playing be false. And then here we're going to say if is playing. So if we're already playing, just return. So you can't just click it a bunch of times and we don't have to worry about restarting or handling any of that logic. And then we'll just say is playing is set to true if you've gotten to that point. Nevertheless, we should be able to click, it waits 2 seconds, and it puts in you're the best. And then, I suppose we don't have any animation in yet, so we can't actually see that it's quickly replacing the image. So we have to do a little more, I guess, before we get that payoff. Probably the quickest way to do that is start adding in some of these different screen variables based on the options. So the first thing, if we actually, I'm going to open this screens back up. And I'll just copy this example here and place it right here. And this will let us see the different things we're going to add. So the first thing is image tells us the location of that image, which means right here we can say, and this is why we're using string literals, is we can add variables in here. And so here we can just say options.image. And that means use whatever image is linked in this options. Next, we have the image animation. And so here, it's always an image, and the class, we will say if an image animation exists, and I'll put that down here, then image animation, otherwise be empty. And we actually don't need to do that. I guess that's a little unnecessary if we just say image animation, and if that doesn't exist, use that string. So that gives us image animation. Next, instead of saying best all the time, let's say text. And sorry, that should be options.text and options.image animation. So that's image animation. And again, I'm just going to throw that down to keep things consistent. And then text color, we will say style is set to, and here we will say if options dot text color, then return another string literal where it says color and options dot text color, otherwise leave the style blank. And I guess that can be like that. So we've got our text color and text animation. Again, here text will be options.text color or just empty. So we should have all of our specifics plugged in here. And so if I click that after 2 seconds, we do not get it. Option is not defined. Options. Try that again. There we go. Yep, cool. So we've got first animation. And it looks like we are always getting the same. I may know exactly what the problem is. And that is that this, when we are, where are we going? Run through screens. So when we're saying run through screens, we're saying pass it I and then add those up, I think. So let's say plus I. And so here, now we're actually counting up and we're getting all of these different animations and images. The final one, you're the best, Mom. And this one probably will disappear because we haven't put the logic in, which is our final bit of logic. And that is on run through screens. Instead of always saying delete after, what we are going to do is say that if I is equal to screens.length minus 1. So if this is our last, then return false. Oops. Return false. Otherwise, return true. So this is saying on the last one, just leave it there and don't delete it. And with that, along with our allowing it to play, we should be good. Now what I will do is put my microphone over by the speaker so I don't have to have it blaring so loud, and give our final E card a look. So it fades out beautifully with this lovely, jovial, happy music, and ideally it will leave your mother with a smile on her face, which is lovely. Now this obviously is nothing crazy, but not only is it something that it's, you know, it's cute, it's a good sign, it's a good gesture, but also it's kind of a good practice when it comes to both animations, if you have to go through and make some of your own, as well as it's a simple idea, but you're taking it, breaking it down into smaller problems, and resolving each one, knocking them out one at a time. And at the end, you've got just a little thing to show. Now, you could easily just put this up. I think GitHub has a way to use static files for posting that on the web, or you could easily put this into something like a Heroku app and send the link to your mom if you're not near her. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of a cool, fun little project that everyone should do. And what's good about the way we built it is you can pick a different song, different text, create some different images in a few months, and do the same thing for your dad for Father's Day. And you don't have to put much effort into it, even though you should. So anyways, I think that's going to do it. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, give it a fat thumbs up. Feel free to drop a like, subscribe, drop cool comments, and share this with all of your cool programmer friends. Otherwise, that's going to do it, guys. Have a wonderful Mother's Day. Give her a big hug. Or if you have to Skype her because of all the craziness that's going on in this world, send her some air hugs over the screen. And I'll see you guys next time.